Okay, good evening, everyone from Central Missouri, where I'm broadcasting from, and Ethan here with me as well. Rebekah is broadcasting, I believe, from New York, and this is the very first edition of the 2026 Plastic Advocates webinar series. My name is Dana Ripper. I'm with the Missouri River Bird Observatory, or MRBO. Also with us tonight, my MRBO co-founder and co-director, Ethan Duke. We're really happy to see everyone here. There's about 100 people on the webinar right now. I don't think you all can see those numbers. And we have more than 250 folks registered for every session in the series. So I wanted to let you know these numbers because if you get to feeling overwhelmed by the problem of plastic, please always remember that you are not alone. There are literally thousands of passionate educators and advocates around the globe that are working on this issue. A brief background on MRBO, where our mission is to contribute to the conservation of birds and all wildlife and their habitats through science, education, and advocacy. MRBO was founded in 2010, so we're entering our 16th year, which is kind of wild. And we established this organization originally to do our part in addressing the precipitous population declines of North American birds. Over time, we've evolved to work on the most pressing conservation issues of the era, and in addition to contributing to the conservation of natural resources, we also work at the intersection of conservation and human health and well-being. You can see here the organization's focal topics, with the most relevant, of course, to tonight being plastic reduction. We at MRBO have been working on the plastic issue for about 6 years. Maybe I can get my slides to work. Maybe not. There we go. And we're very, very grateful for the strong partnership that we have with Missouri Stream Teams United. MRBO and Stream Teams are in the midst of a 3-year project, the Show Me Less Plastic project, funded by Missouri Foundation for Health, in which we work on the systemic reduction of plastic use and production and proliferation in Missouri and beyond through a blend of public education, policy advocacy, and coalition buildings. We have several events coming up that are part of this project. If you happen to be in the mid-Missouri area, I know a lot of folks aren't, and thank you for being here. But if you are, please join us for a couple of events in Jefferson City over the next week or so. We have a community advocacy workshop this coming Saturday, January 24th at Runge Conservation Nature Center. And this will be our 5th of these public workshops, and they are a cornerstone of the civic engagement portion of the Show Me Less Plastic project. The second is a public screening of the documentary Plastic People, also in Jefferson City. We'll have a happy hour preceding the 6 o'clock screening, and then a brief panel discussion and audience Q&A following the movie. We're particularly excited about this one because it's in the Missouri State Capitol. We're in our legislative session right now in Missouri, and we already have several legislators registered. We've invited every state senator and representative and their staff from the Capitol. So it's a really good chance to let our lawmakers know our concerns collectively about the serious issue that is plastic. Please note that you can see all of our upcoming events, both virtual and in person, on our website at mrbo.org. And I'm going to ask Ethan to put all the pertinent links in the chat for these events and for the project so that you can easily access them.
Already have them.
All right, thanks. One more slide. Okay, so before we begin, my last note here, I have one final comment about something that happened in the last week. Many of you may have read or heard about the Guardian article that came out last Tuesday, January 13th. Ethan and I happened to be at the Microplastics Exposure and Human Health Conference in New Mexico at the time the article came out, and there was a great deal of discussion at the conference about the bias and sometimes misleading tone of this piece. For example, this title alone would lead one to believe that maybe we don't have microplastics in our bodies, which is unfortunately untrue. Raising questions about methodology is a normal part of science. It does not invalidate the entire field of research. Measuring microplastics in the human body can be challenging, and methods are still evolving, sometimes quite quickly, as more and more researchers turn to study the emerging health threat posed by plastic and its constituent chemicals. The peer-reviewed literature is consistent on one core fact: plastic is present in our bodies, even if scientists are still refining how much and exactly where. What is often missing from these doubt narratives, like this article, is the extensive evidence showing that microplastics carry toxic chemicals with well-defined health harms, alongside animal studies that have already demonstrated real biological effects. So framing routine scientific debate as a bombshell, as this article does, is to me very suggestive of an industry playbook that uses uncertainty to delay action. Given what we already know, the precautionary approach, not manufactured and sensationalized doubt, is the responsible path for protecting public health. So thank you for bearing with me on all of that. And now, on to our webinar of the evening. We are so happy to welcome Rebekah Creshkoff. I'm going to stop screen sharing here and let you boot up your slides, Rebekah. There you go. You should be able to share. We've known Rebekah for almost 5 years and have done several events together on the topic of plastic, including a workshop in Washington, D.C. a couple years ago for the National Wildlife Federation. Rebekah Creshkoff is a wordsmith who stumbled into the corporate world at the start of her career. Now she is finally doing the type of work she wanted to do all along, environmental activism. She lives in upstate New York on the banks of the Upper Delaware River, where she co-founded Beyond Plastic Sullivan County and Sustainable Sullivan. Currently, she's trying to talk her county legislature out of building a so-called waste-to-energy facility, that is an incinerator, and is offering them more rational alternatives instead. Rebekah is a longtime birder and is happiest when she is outdoors.
If anyone hears chirping from time to time, that is my bird Snowflake. He is geriatric and 3/4 blind, which means he's very needy. So I hope he mellows down. Does anyone hear chirping? Okay, he's quiet right now, so that's cool. All right, thank you, Dana. I'm here today on behalf of Beyond Plastics, a scrappy little nonprofit that educates, advocates, and organizes with the audacious goal of ending plastic pollution everywhere. A few years ago, during the pandemic lockdown, I learned that Judith Enck, the former EPA administrator for my region, was giving an online course called Beyond Plastic Pollution, and I signed up. It was a real eye-opener, and it was a lot of information, more than I could retain. I wanted to be able to talk about the issue intelligently, so I signed up for their Speakers Bureau training, which is how I came to be here today to talk about the history of plastic and how we got here. But before we begin, does everyone know, oh, I guess you obviously all know how to access your reaction buttons, because I want to do a little poll. Does anybody here feel guilty about using plastic? Raise your virtual hand if you do. 2, 5, 16, 35, 30, 41, 40 others. And the number keeps going up. Okay. I think we all feel pretty guilty. Okay, so I'm here to tell you not to feel guilty. I mean, yeah, sure. Maybe you still need to do more to eliminate single-use plastic in your life, like this water bottle my husband brought home from PT the other day. But don't feel guilty, because we inherited this world. We didn't create it, and it started a lot earlier than you might think. I'll get to that in a minute, but let me introduce myself. As Dana said, my name is Rebekah Creshkoff, and I'm a recovering corporate apologist. I served time, 30 years to be precise, working for a Fortune 500 company of which you have heard. Come on, there we go, yes. Here I am with the big boss, Jamie Dimon, a few days before I retired in 2013. My job was to make employees love him, and I was good at it. It didn't hurt that he's charismatic and good looking. Now, here's an even older picture of me with another charismatic and good looking guy, my husband, Lenny. He teased me mercilessly about working for the propaganda department, but Lenny respected my extracurricular activities. I was relatively new to birding, but when I became aware of the issue of birds striking windows, I was concerned. There's a lot of plate glass in New York City. So I started checking around the base of buildings early in the morning on my way to work. This is a male yellow-bellied sapsucker. Other volunteers joined me, and now Project Safe Flight is one of New York City Bird Alliance's signature programs. Lenny is proud of me for starting Project Safe Flight. So it was kind of a gut punch one night after our Chinese takeout dinner when he casually remarked, "Just think, your longest lasting legacy will be all the plastic you've used over the course of your lifetime." Ouch! He didn't mean me personally, of course. He meant all of us. And given the longevity of plastic, he was absolutely right. We can't know for sure, but through tests in labs, we're pretty confident that plastic won't break down into their molecular components for many hundreds, likely thousands of years. Of course, while plastic might not break down, it certainly does break up into tiny plastic particles. We've all been hearing about microplastics and even tinier nanoplastics these past couple of years, and how scientists keep on finding them wherever they look, both on Earth and inside the human body, despite that Guardian article. So, how did we get here? Let's start with a little science. Don't worry, just a tiny bit. I don't know enough science to talk about it for very long. If you're like me a few years ago, you're probably vaguely aware that plastics are polymers. And maybe you don't really understand what a polymer is, let alone that they occur in nature. The word polymer comes from the Greek words for many, poly, and part, mer. You can think of a polymer as an incredibly long chain of repeating building blocks or monomers, that's Greek for one part, that are chemically linked together. Polymers are all over in nature. The cellulose that forms plant walls is a polymer. Here you see a model of the molecular structure of cotton, which is 90% pure cellulose. Wool, silk, and rubber are polymers too. So is keratin, the stuff that makes up hair, nails, fur, animals' horns, and birds' feathers. Protein is a polymer chain of amino acids. DNA, the molecular blueprint of life, is a polymer too. The first man-made polymer was created all the way back in 1833 when a French chemist and pharmacist named Henri Braconnot treated cotton with concentrated nitric acid. The result was a material that dried into a malleable film that could be transformed into a glassy varnish. Although he didn't know it, Braconnot had made nitrocellulose. You'll be hearing that a lot soon. Braconnot's attempts to shape objects out of the material were unsuccessful. But in 1855, Alexander Parkes, a metallurgist and inventor in Birmingham, England, treated nitrocellulose with solvents and invented a material he called Parkesine. That's a sure way to protect your invention, folks. Name it after yourself. He showcased the material at the 1862 London International Exhibition of Industry and Art, that's Victorian for World's Fair, and took home a bronze medal for excellence of product. The catalog described his entry thus: Parkesine of various colors, hard, elastic, transparent, opaque, and waterproof. Parkes made small items like buttons, brush handles, fountain pens, and jewelry with his new material. But he was a better inventor than businessman. When he tried to mass produce Parkesine so it could sell at an affordable price, his reformulated version was brittle and cracked easily. And since nitrocellulose is extremely flammable, one type is a low-order explosive called gun cotton and replaced gunpowder as a propellant in firearms, Parkesine readily caught fire. The company folded after just a couple of years. Next up was John Wesley Hyatt, a printer and inventor in upstate New York who had his eyes on a prize. By the mid-1800s, the formerly upper crust game of billiards had become wildly popular in the United States, as well as in Europe. But the balls were made out of ivory, and given all the demand, they were rapidly running out of elephants. So in 1863, a manufacturer of billiard balls offered a handsome fortune, $10,000 in gold, nearly 300 grand in today's dollars, to anyone who could come up with a substitute for ivory. Hyatt applied camphor, another plant-based material, to nitrocellulose under moderate heat and pressure. The camphor dissolved the nitrocellulose, making it literally plastic in the sense of capable of being molded or of receiving form. It was a version of Parkisine that was simpler to produce. He won a patent for the material and trademarked the name celluloid, meaning like cellulose, a nod to the natural polymers in the cotton or wood pulp feedstock used. Hyatt made billiard balls, but there's no evidence he ever collected the award. Perhaps that's because his early billiard balls had some drawbacks. When two hit each other, they made an explosive crack. A Colorado saloon keeper complained that whenever two balls collided, every man in the room pulled out his gun. A prolific inventor, Hyatt also developed the machinery needed to work his new material. He soon branched out into other products, including dental plates, combs, and piano keys, among many others. So see the pillars on this clock? It looks like marble and wood. That's all celluloid. So is this vanity set, and this shows you how celluloid can take fine details in modeling. One particularly popular line of products were detachable shirt collars, cuffs, and shirt fronts. Hyatt manufactured them by sandwiching linen between two pieces of transparent celluloid. He also invented the machinery to shape and produce the collars and cuffs. The resulting items never required washing and could just be rinsed clean. These were hot items in an era when laundering clothes was labor-intensive and expensive. Only rich people could afford to have their shirts washed after each wearing. Detachable collars and cuffs enabled ordinary folks, particularly those pouring into dirty, coal-fueled cities to find work, to look presentable on modest salaries. I just love this advertising card. And of course, celluloid was used for photographic and motion picture film. Soon the word celluloid applied not just to film, but to the entire phenomenon of cinema. Unfortunately, celluloid film tended to catch fire because of its combustible nitrocellulose base. And fires and explosions at celluloid factories were not rare occurrences, sadly. Today, celluloid has largely been replaced by other safer materials, but it's still used to make ping pong balls. Over his lifetime, Hyatt racked up 238 patents. He died a very rich man. So while Parkisine is considered the first man-made plastic, and its descendant celluloid the first commercially successful plastic, both are actually semi-synthetics because they relied on polymers found in nature. The first fully synthetic polymer made entirely of molecules not found in nature was invented in 1907 in Yonkers, New York, by Belgian-born chemist and entrepreneur Leo Baekeland. Unlike Hyatt, he was already rich, courtesy of his earlier inventions. But at the turn of the century, America was electrifying, and electricity was dangerous. Like celluloid, it caused fires. Wires, sockets, and plugs all needed coating to keep sparks from flying, and the natural substance then used, shellac from the female lac beetle, that's she lac, I'm not kidding, found in Southeast Asia, was expensive. Baekeland set his sights on a replacement. He heated a mixture of phenol derived from coal tar, a byproduct of making the coke used to power furnaces to smelt iron, and formaldehyde derived from wood alcohol to form a dark, durable resin he called Bakelite, incorporating, like Parks before him, his own name into that of his invention. Not only could it be molded and then hardened into any shape, Bakelite was heat resistant and non-conductive. All these properties ensured its commercial success. At first, it was used primarily to make electrical insulators, sockets, and plugs. As time went on, the company branched out to manufacture radio cabinets, telephone receivers, you saw that already, kitchenware, costume jewelry, pipe stems, toys, firearms, and much, much more. It truly was the material of 1,000 uses, as its advertising slogan proclaimed. Bakelin's patent expired in 1927, opening the door for other companies to start manufacturing the material. One, American Catalin Corporation of New York City, came out with brightly colored products. Today, most vintage items called Bakelite are actually Catalin. In 1939, Leo Baekeland sold his company to Union Carbide. Time magazine named Leo Baekeland the father of plastic in 1940, the same year the first wholly synthetic fabric became available. Nylon, derived solely from coal, air, and water, had been invented in 1935 by DuPont chemist Wallace Carothers and introduced in the form of stockings at the 1939 World's Fair in New York. They were an instant sensation, and DuPont launched a marketing campaign designed to whip up maximum excitement. When nylon stockings were released for sale nationwide on May 15, 1940, women flocked to the stores by thousands, cleaning out most locations by noon. Nationwide, 4 million pairs of the most sought-after sizes sold out in 4 days. That year and the next, DuPont sold $34 million worth of nylons, nearly $700 million in today's dollars. And then Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, drawing the United States into World War II. That's when the plastics industry really came of age. Many corporations geared up to produce the material needed to wage the war. Faced with shortages of raw materials like metals, rubber, and silk, manufacturers turned to synthetics across the entire range of military supplies. The stockings craze came to an abrupt halt as nylon was diverted to produce parachutes, which, like stockings, had previously been made of silk. Soon, nylon was also used to make flak jackets, bootlaces, mosquito netting, hammocks, aircraft fuel tanks, glider tow ropes, and fighter plane tires. Oops, sorry, I came to that too early. Women were exhorted to donate their old stockings to the war effort, and magazines ran photos of movie stars peeling them off for Uncle Sam. Its strength, elasticity, weight, and resistance to mildew is why nylon has been called the fiber that won the war. Meanwhile, Bakelite/Catalin pared down their palette of more than 200 colors to olive drab and black as manufacturers shifted to fulfilling wartime needs for items like field phones and aviator goggles. But as the war went on, technology evolved, and manufacturers switched to new plastics that were cheaper and less labor-intensive to produce than Bakelite. One new injection molded plastic was acrylic, better known by the trade name plexiglass. It had been invented in 1933 and made optically perfect cockpit windows and enclosures for gunners. And sorry about the swastikas, folks. They represent the number of German fighter planes this bomber shot down. 1933 was also the year a couple of British chemists had accidentally made polyethylene. They went public with their discovery. But fortunately for the Allies, preeminent German chemists, including a future Nobel Prize winner, didn't believe their conclusions. The Brits found the waxy substance made a great insulator, and polyethylene became a highly guarded military secret. It was used to insulate cables like the big fat ones you see here, which made the newly developed technology of radar possible. Later on in the war, polyethylene enabled the military to develop compact radar units, which were installed on ships and planes. All this technology was new back then, of course. In May 1943, German Admiral Karl Dönitz told Hitler that, quote, enemy aircraft have been equipped with a new location apparatus which enables them to detect submarines and to attack them unexpectedly in low cloud, bad visibility, or at night. Nylon got the credit a minute ago, but polyethylene has been called the resin that helped win the war. Polyvinyl chloride, or PVC, had first been discovered back in 1835. A solid white mass, It remained a laboratory curiosity for 90 years. It became useful only in 1926 when Waldo Semon, a chemist at BF Goodyear, found a way to make it flexible by adding a plasticizer. And that's my excuse to show you this gorgeous ad from the September 1940 issue of Fortune magazine, in which Union Carbide explains the ancient origins of synthetic chemicals. Here's some of the text. I'm going to zoom in so you can see the art better. The forest found root in primeval muck. Eons passed, the forest died and was transformed into a vast storehouse of natural resources, which includes deposits of coal and petroleum. Today, through the white magic of synthetic organic chemistry, scientists draw upon elements from that primitive storehouse and ingeniously combine them to form chemicals that contribute endlessly to industry and to mankind. These chemicals are so versatile that from them come excellent bases for delicate perfumes, as well as the fluid in the hydraulic brakes of automobiles. Among them are the essential raw materials for synthetic resins. That's an oblique way of referring to the plasticizers that finally made PVC flexible and therefore useful. Thanks to that white magic from the forest primeval, PVC was now so flexible that during the war, PVC film, think early cling wrap, was used to protect entire airplanes, artillery, and other equipment from corrosion during transatlantic shipping. Synthetics were deployed in troops' personal supplies. Both polyvinyl chloride and polystyrene were pressed into service in rain gear and helmet liners. And the PVC film, again, was used to make a breathable mesh insole for tropical combat boots. Even the atom bomb had plastic parts, and Teflon-coated valves and gaskets were essential to its production. Discovered by accident on April 6, 1938, Teflon was both the first PFAS forever chemical and the first fluoropolymer, that is, a plastic incorporating a fluorine molecule into its carbon backbone. The fluorine is electrically negative, so it doesn't easily bond with other materials. That's what makes fluoropolymers non-stick. Teflon is considered the most slippery material in existence. Thanks to government contracts, US plastic production increased by 300% during the war. But manufacturers were well aware that once it was over, they'd have to find peacetime markets. So even after the US joined the war, Dow was advertising to consumers on the home front about the wonders of what we now call polystyrene, which had been invented in 1839, but not commercially produced for another 90 years, Meanwhile, an entire DuPont division worked on prototypes of housewares that could be made of the plastics then commandeered for the war. But though the industry had shown they could mass produce a vast range of plastic goods for government consumption, it wasn't clear that ordinary citizens would buy them. Plastics had a bad rap among consumers. It smelled strange, couldn't be repaired when it broke, and melted when heated. In 1944, Disney lampooned plastics deficiency in a cartoon in which Donald Duck bakes broken plastic items into an airplane, which ultimately melts in the rain. It was time to launch an aggressive marketing campaign. The industry touted the wonders of their new synthetic materials, becoming one of Madison Avenue's biggest clients. They collaborated with women's magazines on special issues dedicated to plastics. McCall's even sent an 11-page booklet to 12,000 home economics teachers around the country. Soon plastics were as American as apple pie. And as for women's hose, just 8 days after Japan surrendered, DuPont announced it would resume making nylon stockings. But it failed to meet its production targets, and supply was limited. In 1945 and 46, women crowded department stores and stood in mile-long queues in hopes of buying a pair. there were actually nylon riots. The New York Times wrote of nightmarish mob scenes as would-be customers fought over hosiery. But let's turn back to Madison Avenue. The ad men succeeded so well that by the mid-1950s, the industry looked to grow not by moving plastic into people's homes, but through them. This issue of Life magazine celebrating throwaway living came out in 1955. All those items were made of or incorporated plastic. The following year, at a conference of the Society of the Plastics Industry, the editor of Modern Packaging magazine said it was time to concentrate on single-use packaging, which represented, quote, not a one-shot market for a few thousand units, but an everyday recurring market measured by the billions of units. The future of plastics, he said, is in the trash can. His boss gave him some heat for that remark. He explained when he spoke to the trade group again 7 years later, quote, you are literally filling the trash cans, the rubbish dumps, and the incinerators with literally billions of plastics bottles, plastics jugs, plastics tubes, blisters and skin packs, plastics bags and films and sheet packages, and now even plastics cans, he enthused. The happy day has arrived when nobody any longer considers the plastics package too good to throw away. Here's an ad from that era. You won't be surprised to learn that this guy was inducted into the Packaging and Processing Hall of Fame. So the disposable phenomenon is nothing new, but it's been accelerating almost exponentially. And it really took off in 2005 when the Energy Policy Act exempted fracking from Safe Water Drinking Act regulations. This is known as the Halliburton loophole, and it set off a boom in hydrofracking, leading to a glut of cheap shale gas, as well as its cheap byproduct, ethane, which used to be burned off. Now ethane is the source of virtually all plastic made in the US today. So the industry keeps on making more and more plastic and convincing more and more producers and retailers of fast-moving consumer goods to wrap more and more things in it. As consumers, we cannot escape plastic. And the industry knows that plenty of us feel guilty about it. That's why they've engaged in an aggressive, decades-long campaign to convince us that plastics recycling works. According to a joint investigation by NPR and Frontline, the industry persuaded the public that most plastic could and would be recycled, even though they knew otherwise. As an insider wrote in 1974, there is serious doubt that recycling plastic can ever be made viable on an economic basis. As this cynical quote suggests, the plastics industry viewed recycling as a way to shore up their markets. So they spent millions telling people to recycle, because selling recycling sells plastic. The tactic worked. The industry has duped us into being willing partners in keeping plastic moving through our homes. Here's a storyboard for a 1990 commercial from DuPont. A plastic bottle, empty but filled with potential, the voiceover says, refuses to stay in a garbage truck and ultimately flies to DuPont, which has, quote, pioneered the country's largest, most comprehensive plastic recycling program to help plastic fill valuable uses and roles. Historical tangent here. The iconic recycling symbol was created in 1970 by a 23-year-old architecture student, Gary Anderson, for a design competition held by a cardboard box manufacturer. 18 years later, the Society of the Plastics Industry appropriated the 3 chasing arrows for their resin identification system. It was an ingenious marketing move because people naturally interpreted it to mean that any item with a symbol could be recycled. Most of us remain convinced these symbols mean an item is recyclable. And if you're like me a couple of years ago, you put just about anything made of plastic into the recycling bin, hoping it'll get recycled. Wrong. No matter what your community or waste hauler tells you, only number 1 PET bottles and number 2 and HDPE bottles and jugs have a realistic chance of getting recycled. And possibly number 5 polypropylene containers if you live in a major urban center. That's because there are only two types. That's because these are the only types of post-consumer plastic for which there are markets. And even number one and number two plastics generally aren't recycled into new bottles and jugs. Instead, they are largely downcycled into carpeting and fleece fabric. While that might sound like a higher and better use, it does nothing to prevent more single-use plastic bottles from being produced. And of course, someday those carpets and fleece pullovers will have to be disposed of too. As for plastics number 3 through 7, it's more cost-effective for producers to buy virgin plastic pellets because they're much cheaper than recycled plastic. No one's going to use recycled plastic if they're losing money on it. Given plastic's durability, most of the plastic ever made, well over 8 billion tons, is still with us today. Just how much plastic is that? That's twice the weight of all animals alive today, from insects through mammals, including humans and our livestock. That's equivalent to the mass of 114 moons. Of those more than 8 billion tons of plastic, over half has been made just in the last 15 years. And a staggering 42% of the plastic today goes to make packaging. The majority of plastics today are designed to be used only briefly before being discarded. So how did we get here? Well, the feedstocks for these synthetic materials are all byproducts of the oil and gas industry, starting back with Leo Baekeland. Look at it from their perspective. Oil refineries and fracking operations run 24/7 and continuously generate byproducts that must be disposed of. If you can find a use for your byproduct instead of paying to get rid of it, your byproduct becomes an economic opportunity. These days in the US, plastic polymers are mostly made from a byproduct of fracked gas, ethane, which is captured and sent by pipelines to an ethane cracker facility. Cracking is the term for the process of breaking molecular bonds in complex hydrocarbons to create simpler ones. Because the carbon-carbon bond is so strong, the process requires huge amounts of power to generate extremely high temperatures and consequently emits immense amounts of greenhouse gases. Ethane cracks around 1650 degrees Fahrenheit, creating the monomer ethylene. Add pressure and a catalyst, and you get polyethylene, which is extruded and cut into little pellets. These polyethylene pellets are the feedstocks for most plastics made today, everything from auto parts to zippers. Ethane crackers are extremely complex. They are among the largest, most expensive, and most energy-intensive facilities in the process and manufacturing sectors. Building one is a massive infrastructure investment, and the industry has been on a building spree. In recent years, the industry has invested $163 billion on petrochemical products and facilities in just the US alone. In 2019, emissions from plastic productions emitted more than 850 million metric tons of greenhouse gases. Sorry, that was a little garbled. Equivalent to 189 coal-fired power plants. So that's from plastic production. 189 large coal-fired power plants. At current growth rates, plastic production could make it virtually impossible for us to avoid climate catastrophe because big corporations don't just walk away from multi-billion-dollar investments. They don't want to wind up with stranded assets. Their business model commits them to making and selling ever more plastic. So once again, how did we get here? It's tempting to blame the scientists if all those chemists hadn't been dicking around in the lab. But it's human nature to be curious and to want to make money. And plastic certainly has made the petrochemical companies money. The global plastics market was valued at over $700 billion in 2023. Money and marketing, that's how we got here. So what can we do about all this? First of all, as I said at the top, don't feel guilty. This is not our fault. We weren't sitting around in boardrooms making decisions in the 1950s and 1960s, let alone the 20s and 30s. We inherited this situation. We didn't create it. And if all this has gotten you depressed, Freud said that depression is anger turned inward. So harness that anger and put it to work fighting the plastics crisis. As folk singer and activist Joan Baez said, action is the antidote to despair. So while we can't fix this problem overnight, we can start to make it better by not making it any worse. So rather than trying to manage an ever-increasing amount of plastic waste, we need to find upstream solutions and stop making so much plastic in the first place. And since more than 40% of the plastic produced today goes to make single-use packaging, that's where we need to zero in. It won't be easy. The industry struck gold with plastic, and they struck gold again when they convinced us that recycling was a viable way to manage plastic waste. That means we need to tackle this not just through our personal choices, but through policy change. Not sure about how to do that? Sign up for Beyond Plastics 2-hour online advocacy training later this month. They have 3 dates to choose from: Saturday, January 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday the 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and Thursday the 29th, also at 7 p.m. Eastern. Choose the slot that's best for you. It's free. And I highly recommend Judith Enk's excellent 7-week online class, Beyond Plastic Pollution. It's offered out of Bennington College and is open to anyone high school age and up. I've taken it twice. And tune back in here for the next webinar in the Plastic Learning Series on February 2nd, when my friend and colleague, Megan Wolff, PhD, will discuss plastics and human health. To my mind, the single most critical aspect of the plastics issue. Megan founded the Physician and Scientist Network Addressing Plastics and Health, or PSNAP. If she doesn't motivate you to take action on the plastics crisis, then nothing will. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate your time and attention, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Here's how you can reach me. Back over to you, Dana. How do I stop sharing?
Fantastic. There might be a red area that says stop share or somewhere around on your screen.
Oh, well, look at that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yay.
That was great, Rebekah. And we did receive a few questions. A couple of them were in the chat, and one was in the Q&A. And I thought maybe we'd address that one, that important one first, maybe. And that
Okay,
was what kind of bird is snowflake?
Oh! Snowflake is a white-faced cockatiel, a cinnamon white-faced teal. So he's about yay tall. Oh, here's a primary feather. That means it's one of his main wing feathers. I could have showed this up, hold this up to show.
Nice.
So unlike other cockatiels, he doesn't have the orange cheeks. He has white cheeks. He's gray and white, and we thought he was a girl, and that's why we gave him the femme name. He looked like a snowflake when he was a baby in his baby plumage.
Awesome. Well, we did get a couple questions here in the chat, and Lois Zur asked, "Are there more recycling numbers in other countries?"
They're all pretty much the same. They're all the world over, certainly globally. 9% is the absolute maximum you can come up with, and yeah, there's a bunch of downsides to recycling. I'm not a fan of recycling plastic because all plastics has chemicals in them, some of which are known to be toxic, and recycling concentrates the toxic chemicals. So these chemicals are known to be damaging human health. So why would we do this? It's not a solution.
So Lynn Glober asked, What about the plastic bags they accept at the big box grocery and big box stores? Because I mean, don't they recycle them?
Probably not.
I think I
They
I think
they
I'd
probably
read
get sent. Oh, go ahead, Ethan.
yeah, I think I'd read someplace where somebody had done some tracking of that.
Yeah,
And you know, like the AirPods or something, and they just
exactly.
determined that they didn't really get recycled.
That's right. Winding up in a landfill somewhere, getting shipped to Romania, all sorts of crazy stuff. It just makes no sense. See, when you recycle plastic, the polymer chain gets broken down, and it's the length of that polymer chain that makes plastic strong. But when you start breaking it down, then the plastic itself isn't very strong anymore. It's not durable. So any given bit of polymer, I mean, if we were to recycle this could be recycled at most twice, just one or two times, and then the plastic itself is just too flimsy to hold water. It's not that they go ahead and make the bottles and reject it. I think they have some sort of system where the lousy ones float on the top of the water, that kind of thing. You have chips of your plastic and sort them out that way.
Yeah, recycling leads to downcycling, right? And then there's also, you know, the incineration aspects, which we know is pretty bad, pretty horrible, especially the communities that do the most of that. You can learn more about that on those upcoming events that we've been posting there. Dana, do you see any other additional questions or anything in there?
Lots going on in the chat here.
I wish I could see it.
This is a great question. I love it. What can we
Gridwell,
do?
Gridwell is
Sorry,
no
Rebecca,
good.
go.
I just saw Bridget Lee. Gridwell is also a myth.
Mm. What can we do to fight against billions of dollars of lobbyists for big oil, from big oil, to push for real change in our policies? Boom, there's the billion dollar question.
I wish I had the answer to that. Yeah, that's a good one.
Organized people over organized money.
Yeah,
I
maybe
th
one of the people in the
Indeed.
chat would be a good idea.
in
Yeah,
keeping with Dana's statements to begin this evening's program, I, I s- we work with advocacy across the variety of things, whether it's plastics and pesticides, or those two things are related, or other water quality issues, and other areas where there are a lot of industry interests with a lot of power and a lot of money, and I don't think they're being as successful. You know, I think we're seeing a lot of desperation, and I think it's time that we all, you know, embrace democratic processes that we have to do the most that we can. Everybody's got a special talent. Everybody can use it in their own way. There's a lot of different ways to plug and engage, but together, I think we can do this.
roll up your sleeves, everyone. Just like
And
Rosie the Riveter.
have fun at it too. That's the best way to remain resilient.
Oh, okay. So microplastics we're going. Boy, that's a conversation, Shannon. Going to do an education campaign. So
Shannon, I might suggest, and she's on here, so Story, if you would like to provide your email address to Shannon. So Story is our plastic pollution educator under the Show Me Less Plastic project that I talked about earlier. And she has been doing many very high quality education programs with students of all ages. So the two of you could connect because I know that Story could provide you with a lot of resources, Shannon.
yes, microplastic madness is terrific. But I think those are probably younger kids. And Shannon's. Okay, there you go. Okay, Dana.
Okay, Rebekah. Well, thank you so much.
You're very
I learned a
welcome.
lot again, even though we've worked together a bunch of times. I learned a lot again. So,
I did too.
and
Man, I got a lot of new
hopefully,
research for you.
hopefully we'll see you on the next few webinars if you'll
Yeah.
come join us and make comments, etc. And just a reminder, we did put the link to register for the next few Plastic Advocates webinars into the chat. One of the things that we will learn a lot about from Megan of PSNAP, as Rebekah noted earlier, is the true state of the medical science. So if the Guardian article confused anyone, or someone wrote in the chat that someone approached them being excited about, hey, all of a sudden there's no microplastic in our bodies. Next, in 2 weeks, we will learn about the true and current state of the medical science. So
Thank you all for these nights.
it was
Thank yous
wonderful.
in the chat. I really appreciate it.
It was wonderful seeing you again.
Aw.
See you all.
good night, everybody.